Welcome to the latest installment of the World Trade Center Utah webinar series. Today we are talking global logistics in a COVID world, building resilience with supply chains. And we wanted to structure today's webinar more like a roundtable. And so for those that have participated in World Trade Center Utah events prior to COVID, imagine being in our conference room, we'd have the table set up and a giant kind of circle. We'd have Jack and Jason and Jim with us, and we'd be able to have a discussion, a conversation, as all of us, through our various perspectives, are trying to understand how COVID is affecting global logistics, what we should be thinking about, both as a state and public entities with the inland port, as well as individual companies, about adapting, innovating, and overcoming the challenges created by COVID.
Miles, we lost you.
We're very grateful for Jason Fowler with RNC International, Jack Hedge with the Utah Inland Port Authority, and Jim Porter from the World Trade Center Utah team for being with us today and being part of this discussion. Before jumping into the discussion, thinking through, I wanted to give a quick update on some of the work that's going on with the Governor's Economic Response Task Force as it relates to our global engagement and supply chains and international sales. Yesterday, hopefully you all saw that the governor released volume 4 of the Utah Leads Together plan. And I wanted to call attention to a couple elements that I think help create a frame for what we're trying to do as we think through Utah's engagement. We know that COVID has impacted many things in life. It's come with a very significant human cost right here in Utah in the lives of the people who've had it, the many people who've tragically died and their families. And it's also brought very significant economic cost as well here in Utah. Despite the pain and the challenges we faced here, as we look out across the country and around the world, one thing is clear, and that is that we have fared relatively well compared to other states and in other countries even. From our perspective, what that means is, one, we're fortunate with good leadership and good policy and a lot of good fortune. And it also means that we now have an opportunity as a state to continue to work hard on how we manage the risk. And the risk is still there, right? Over the past few months, the risk has been there. What we saw when we shut down significant parts of the economy was the risk was significant. Our ability to manage that risk starting out was low, right? Pandemics happen once every 100 years, which means you lose institutional knowledge over 100 years. Over the past 2 or 3 months, as a state, as individual companies and families and even individuals, we're all learning how to manage this risk. And for as long as the risk is there, we don't necessarily have to shut everything down or remain in quarantine, but as our capacity to manage that risk is increased, our ability to re-engage in a really strategic, aggressive way is coming into focus. And our ability to manage that risk here in Utah is becoming very, very strong. That means that we all have to be smart with wearing masks, sanitizing, making adjustments in the workplace, adhering to all the public health guidance that we are receiving. But as we do that, and we're diligent about doing that, then we have opportunities to get out and to engage. Economic recovery will come as our companies get out and continue to grow revenue. That can happen as companies figure out how to manage their supply chains effectively. As we get very, very good here in the state at optimizing our supply chains, leveraging all the different assets and programs and resources we have here in the state, that's going to give our companies a competitive advantage. It's going to help them to go back out into the global marketplace to take advantage of the economic disruption that has occurred and to go and compete and win and expand market share in other markets. But it all comes back to the significant topic of today, which is making sure we figure out how to get things from point A to point B as efficiently as possible, and to learn how we can partner with like the Inland Port Authority and great companies like RNC International in doing that. I wanted to draw attention very quickly to page 12 in volume 4 of the Utah Leads Together plan. In there you will see that one of the key action items that the task force and the governor and state leaders call on is achieving a higher trajectory of global leadership and growth. This is not in the 100-day section, the 250-day section. It's what we're going to do over the next 500 days and beyond. But in there, we can expect to see policies come into focus and programs that are designed to achieve the following: boost confidence in international trade and investment, increase competitiveness of Utah businesses, encourage portfolio resilience as a state, communities, and businesses by securing diversified suppliers and maintaining spare capacity, inventory, and cash on hand, and enable an aggressive Utah business campaign to go out there, like I was talking about, and capture foreign market share. And the final item that we're working to achieve is to resist the urge to seek security through protectionist sentiments and trade barriers. And I really encourage everybody listening today to go through, look at all through Volume 4. It is an incredible document, but take a look specifically on this important truth, which is that Utah's path to recovery and revitalization runs through global markets. And so thank you, everybody, for being with us. And with that framework, let's go ahead and jump into the agenda. We're going to hear from Jack Hedge here for a few minutes to get an update on working on the business plan that was released a couple weeks ago. We then will hear from Jason Fowler to share his perspective on what he is seeing as a shipping logistics company, some of the impacts of COVID are, and to provide some strategies and ideas that you can be thinking through with your business. We then will hear from Jim Porter, who is a trade service manager at World Trade Center Utah and is in the trenches helping provide consulting services, doing market research, helping companies unstick problems that they're facing with their supply chains and logistics. At that point, I have a few questions here that I'll ask Jack and the other panelists will have a chance to weigh in, and we'll make sure we save some time at the end where you can ask your questions. You can type in questions in the chat box. Hannah will keep an eye on that. And if you want to turn your, I guess you can't turn on your video, so I guess chat is your one option. So send a chat. If Hannah's not getting your question, then just repeat it a couple of times, and we'll do everything we can to get through everybody's questions, and then we can make sure to follow up if we run out of time. So with that, Jack, let's go ahead and turn it over to you. Before doing so, I'm confident looking at the list of people who are registering today that we're all familiar with you and the great work you do, but people may not be as familiar with your background. So I'm going to have a quick bio I'm going to read if that's okay. Jack Hedge assumed the role of the Executive Director of the Utah Inland Port Authority in June of 2019. His charge is to develop and build the nation's leading sustainable intermodal logistics hub that will help prepare for, support, and manage Utah's continuing economic growth. Hedge will focus on expanding economic opportunity and international trade while mitigating the impacts to air quality, traffic congestion, and habitat. Hedge was previously the Director of Cargo and Industrial Real Estate for the Port of Los Angeles. In this role, Hedge led the development, leasing, and asset management functions of the largest container port complex in North America, managing a $4 billion portfolio and more than $270 billion in cargo annually. Jack's previous roles include Director of Real Estate and Asset Management for the Port of Tacoma, Managing Director for North American Energy Services Capital, and Development Manager at Ensearch International Ltd. So Jack, with that introduction, I'll kick it over to you, and then from there we'll go to Jason.
Great, Miles. Thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak today to this group, being on a panel again with Jason and Jim. It's a great opportunity, and we really appreciate it. And yeah, like you said, I think logistics and supply chain is the backbone for our future growth, both as we recover from the impacts of the pandemic and our long-term economic growth over time. Logistics is absolutely fundamental and key to having a strong, vital economy going forward. Supply chains, distribution channels, those are all critical elements to having a strong economy. The purpose of the Inland Port Authority really is to take that sort of global, holistic view of our supply chains and our logistics system, not just here in Utah, but how it interconnects with the rest of the globe, with the rest of North America and the rest of the world. And that's something that we're really excited about. It's unique. There's not another state agency that exists today in the United States that has this sort of really holistic view of the state. They're state port authorities, and they may have an inland port element to them, but no one has sort of this overarching holistic view of things. And I think that's really exciting and really one of the things that really makes this opportunity unique. I think everyone understands today just how important and how vital our supply chains are. I think we all now have a better understanding where our toilet paper comes from. And it doesn't just magically appear on the shelf. Some truckers got to get it there. It's got to get to their store shelf somehow. And people don't usually talk about supply chains at the dinner table, but they are today. So the strategic plan document that we issued a couple of weeks ago really sort of lays out our vision, the mission, sort of the things that you would expect to see in a strategy document. And that's the appropriate level at this stage. That's the appropriate level for the board to act on. That's the appropriate level for the board to weigh in and say, this is the vision and this is the lens, staff, that you will use to make your business decisions going forward, that we will be judged by as we move forward and as we advance the ball. And that's really what that strategy document is about, what that business plan is really about. It was, I got to say, Miles, it was really encouraging to me, and that the plan 4.0 that you just referenced really picked up a lot of those key elements that we've been talking about in our strategy document, in the inland port document, the importance of logistics, the importance of supply chains and things like that, and taking this statewide view of things. It was really encouraging to me to see those things being incorporated into the plan in that way, and we appreciate that. Our logistics network in this state is very, very interconnected to the rest of the nation, and it really is a strength of our economy here in the state. As businesses, as companies look for places to be the most cost-effective and the most effective in terms of their business plan, that ability to manage their supply chain and the costs associated with their supply chain and their distribution channels is critical. It's a critical component of any business's business plan. And we have a unique set of facilities and infrastructure here and opportunities here that I think we can really promote and really strongly develop that aspect of things in the future as we go forward and as we start to attract businesses here, as we help businesses rebuild here in Utah and attract future businesses to Utah. Our location, our position, that interconnectivity of road and rail and air all coming together here in this one location, unlike anything else in the world. It really is. And it's a huge opportunity for us and a really game-changing a set of circumstances that we have here. I'll let you get into the questions and things like that, but I think this opportunity that we have before us, it's unlike anything else anywhere in the world. It's unique to Utah. There's not another state, I don't believe, in the United States that has this set of opportunities before it. And I'm super excited about the next 100 days, 300 days, 500 days, and way beyond that. So thanks for the opportunity, Miles.
Great. Thank you, Jack, for that perspective. Okay, Jason, I've got a bio for you as well, so I'm going to go ahead and read that. I thought it was really cool. Jason is third generation when it comes to shipping, logistics, and supply chain. So this guy has generations of experience and background. Jason Fowler is the co-owner and president of RNC International, a 35-year-old freight forwarder and customs house broker located in Salt Lake City, Utah. Jason grew up in Utah and graduated from the U of U in 1996. Jason's dad, Brent Fowler, founded the company in 1985, and logistics has always been in his blood, as his grandfather founded Motor Cargo, a regional LTL trucking company based out of Tooele. RNC International is built with a common culture of customer service, technology, advancement, and flexibility. And I'll add that RNC International is a longtime member of World Trade Center Utah. And Jason, we appreciate all that partnership and all the opportunities that we have to work together. So Jason, over to you for some introductory thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Miles. The new normal here with COVID, it's things are getting to the new normal, but before it was really a roller coaster. We had air freight rates that were just out of this world. We had capacity withdrawn in the air freight market. Same with the ocean freight. We had a lot of what they call blank sailings coming into the U.S. and exports out. So the blank sailings are actually a really good indicator of how our economy is going to grow. The more blank sailings, obviously, the worse that we're going to fare. And we had an all-time high, Jack. I think it was we're close to like 500 blank sailings. Third quarter looks a lot more promising,
yeah,
which is good news, I think, for everyone. But we've told our customers the best way to negotiate this bottleneck that we have going right now is planning and communication. I mean, it's pretty simple. You have to, talk to your logistics providers, find out where the bottlenecks are, and have multiple options. You can't just have one option. I mean, China is just, the gorilla in the room, and it is, it keeps getting bigger and bigger, honestly. But, you are seeing some migration, Vietnam and Southeast Asia. There's a lot of companies who are considered near sourcing, like through Costa Rica and other places, to try to, whittle down the transit time on things. So it has been a very, very interesting few months, that is for sure.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you, Jason. Jim, let's go ahead and get your perspective of what you're hearing from companies. And Jim, I don't have a bio for you, but what I will do is Jim Porter has been with World Trade Center Utah longer than anybody else on the team. He's been here for, about 3 years, Jim, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
So I've been here about 18 months or so. So Jim is the wise man in the office, helping us all make sure we do things the right way. And more importantly, for the companies listening in, Jim and his team are able to provide free market research, consultations. If you need to get connected with just about anybody anywhere in the world, let us know, because we can plug in and work our network to help make those introductions for you. And he runs export boot camps across the state where we're taking companies, helping assess what they're already doing international, or perhaps maybe they're right on the cusp and they haven't started yet, and putting together a detailed plan so that they can go and take advantage of these free programs and resources that we have as an organization and start accelerating their international growth. And so Jim is a great resource. He can be a gateway to get grant funding for small businesses here in the state to help offset the cost of going international. And so he's somebody, for anybody that doesn't know him yet, I'd highly recommend you reach out, do a consultation, and see how we can plug in and support your growth. So Jim, with that introduction, I'll kick it over to you to get some initial thoughts.
Thanks, Miles. That's a great introduction. And honestly, it's great just to be able to hitch my caboose, hitch up as the caboose to this train of Jack and Jason, such great people that follow behind and great partners to World Trade Center Utah. I think I appreciated Jack's comments in the positivity and the vision associated with those. It reminds us that Utah is one of the best places in the world to be, especially during this time. We've, as Jason mentioned, we've had a lot of disruption due to COVID-19. I think it behooves us all well to remember that COVID-19 isn't going away anytime soon. So Utah's done relatively well from a health perspective, from an economic perspective relative to other places. But all you have to do is look down at Brazil and see that from a global perspective, we're going to be dealing with COVID-19 for a while. And so businesses need to start thinking long-term about how to handle the disruptions from COVID-19 on top of all the disruptions that were already occurring in the trade environment prior to the epidemic breaking out. If you all remember, we're in the midst of a trade war right now with China. The U.S. is also picking fights with other neighbors. And so it's unlikely that even in the long term, we're going to see tariff volatility, for example, decrease. Instead, we should plan on that, I think, being the norm from here on out. And that's where I can be valuable, and World Trade Center Utah more broadly can be valuable to companies as a help desk. Call us up, help us to understand your needs. My guess is that either through us or our partner network, we can help you identify solutions to the issues that you're having. And to that point, there are three recommendations that I'd make today of things that you can do today to help yourself prepare for the future, to manage your risk, to become more resilient, and also to protect your cash flows along the supply chain and through your distribution network so that you can get back to work and do it with minimal disruption. So let me make three quick recommendations to you. First is to get your own house in order. As you begin to bring employees back, particularly for manufacturers, you need to start considering how to bring them back in such a way to minimize the risk of COVID-related disruptions. Like I mentioned before, COVID's not going away, and all you have to do is look up north into Cache Valley to see that very quickly the circumstances, your work circumstances can change very quickly, right? If you're JBSEA Miller, you might have to make rapid adjustments to your operations in order to make sure that you don't have these disruptions. So the first thing you can do is learn about how to best manage that risk. World Trade Center Utah just joined the Utah Industry Resource Alliance, which is a group of organizations whose job it is to help manufacturers in the state. And there's free trainings available to you and to your employees about how to come back to work safely, both short form and long form trainings that you can take advantage of. If you're interested in those, please shoot me an email or just let me know in the chat that you're interested, and I'll send you information about how to take advantage of those trainings. The second is to reassess your sourcing strategies. And we're talking long-term here, right? COVID-19 has laid bare the fact that there are substantial hidden costs associated with having these long international supply chains, and that companies need to consider strategically how to secure critical supply of either components or materials, whatever it may be, whether that be through reshoring some operations, as Jason mentioned, nearshoring some operations, or even creating redundancy in your critical supplies. There are a number of different ways you can go about that. So my second recommendation to you would be to reach out to us if you are looking for other suppliers or other opportunities to kind of optimize that supply chain. And through our network of international partners that Miles mentioned earlier, we can help you not only find suppliers, but understand the skinny about doing business in some markets that you might not have done business before, and help you think about how you can remove some of the risk out of your supply chain if you've been located just in China, right? Or even right now, just in Brazil, whatever it may be. We can be a help desk for you through our great network of partners. And the third recommendation I'd make for long-term planning is to take a look at some of the assets that Utah already has. I'm sure Jack will talk about Utah's foreign trade zone later on in this presentation, but the foreign trade zone number 30 located in Salt Lake City is a fantastic resource for Utah companies who are looking to better manage their cash flow along international supply chains. If you're importing and exporting out of the United States, you really need to take a close look into these foreign trade zones, which in effect are geographic areas that are outside the jurisdiction of Customs and Border Protection that you can use to defer or eliminate some taxes and tariffs on your goods. So if you think if you're fulfilling to inside the United States and you've got and you're importing goods or components that you're going to manufacture and send out, instead of paying for those goods or instead of paying taxes and tariffs on those goods right away, if you can defer those until you're actually fulfilling the shipment to the customer, there's some great cash flow benefits that you can take advantage of by using this as a tool. So reach out to us at World Trade Center Utah or to Lisa Lindbergh at Salt Lake City Economic Development, or even to Jack's team, to Ginger Chin at the UIPA, and we'll help you engage and figure out if the foreign trade zone is a good fit for you. So those are my 3 recommendations, and I hope to hear from each of you over the next few days to see how we can help you manage these solutions and plan for the long term.
Thank you very much for that. Jim's top 3. I hope everybody took notes because great advice there. Appreciate it, Jim. So let's go and open up and start having a discussion and asking some questions. First let's go to Jack. Jack, you talked about the business plan that you just released at the inland port. You touched on lightly the impact of COVID on logistic flows around the world. Can you take one step deeper, based on your experience here at the inland port, but also LA? How has COVID affecting global logistic flows, and what do you think the implications are for Utah's economy in the near future? And I'll buttress that with just a couple data points. Somehow I got on the Port of LA's distribution list, and they're great emails. The monthly ones, they give a good update. And I remember that, in March, it seems like March was down about 25%, March of this year versus last year. But then April, I was surprised because I remember it was only down like 6% or so. May was down 25%-ish again. And so we see these really pretty significant reductions in shipping flows. And so be curious to your take, Jack, on, how long are these going to be reduced? How do these come back? And then if you could dial it in, what does it mean for Utah's economy, but also Utah companies?
Yeah, Yeah, and I think that's a very good point, Miles. The numbers have been dramatically reduced, and Jason mentioned earlier blank sailings. Well, what that means basically is they canceled this ship. They canceled that particular vessel. So what it can mean is when you see those reductions, what they're doing is they're matching up capacity with demand, and which all makes sense, right? But if you're waiting on a shipment and you've got a shipment that's coming by vessel, and you're expecting that vessel to come in, you're used to that, you're used to getting a shipment once a month by vessel into LA. What's happening is they reduce that demand, they reduce those available vessel calls, then your cargo gets rolled. And so if you were expecting a shipment to come in May, well, now it may not come in until June or July or August, depending on how much it gets rolled. So it can have a dramatic impact, a dramatic and lasting impact on your supply chain as those vessel calls continue to be reduced and that cargo gets rolled. That's I think one of the more telling things that can happen to a company's supply chain. And if you're a big importer and you've got a lot of boxes coming through a lot of different gateways, you can ride that out a little bit. You can kind of manage, you can redirect stuff and things like that. But if you're a smaller company and you're relying on one gateway, you get 1 or 2 boxes a month, and you've got to rely on that to keep your production lines going, that can really put you in a bind if your cargo gets rolled. So I think that's one of the things that we've got to do. One of the ways to deal with that are some of the things that Jim just spoke about. It's diversifying your supply chain, finding more locations to source supply from, nearshoring and reshoring to the extent that you can, and then taking advantage of some of those other things, like you said, keeping your powder dry with regards to cash flow and things like that. It really has had an impact. These very long supply chains have proven to be extremely fragile. And I think that's the biggest thing, the most telling thing. And so if you're dependent, if you're sort of locked into a single supply chain, it's really long and fragile, you really need to be looking at how do you diversify and how do you spread your risk.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you, Jack, for that perspective. I'm going to follow up with Jason. As you think about your clients, the companies that you're helping day in and day out as they manage through some of these really difficult challenges, do you have anything to add from that specific company perspective? And then when you think through solutions, so what do companies do about it? Any advice you'd have for people listening in today?
Yeah, to kind of hit on Jack's point too, the blank sailings and the slowdowns also affect the exports, especially on inland points like here in Utah, right? Because there's usually plenty of equipment on the ports, but here in Salt Lake, it's really dependent on the imports coming in and the exports going out. So if there's not a lot of imports coming in, these carriers are not going to waste their money on transferring empty boxes here to Salt Lake. So it is really interconnected, like Jack was saying. But we tell our customers that exact same thing, that they have to have more than one answer. I mean, they have to have A, B, and C. If they see that there's congestion in Long Beach, then they need to have a Oakland discharge, or on the East Coast, Savannah, Charleston. You just have to have a lot of options, and it's best if you can do it not from just one country. Brazil, we're shipping a lot of things from Brazil, but people really need to stay on top of the trade news that's coming in. It's as boring as it sounds, and Jack and I can sit and talk about it all day long, but it is vital. I mean, people like you're saying, now people know where their toilet paper comes from. So it is a very fragile thing that in a lot of these markets, especially the exports and the imports. What you were talking about with the bump in April, that was a mad rush because China had shut down for Chinese New Year. So everybody had their back orders still on back order. And with the extension of Chinese New Year, you got that bump in April. But then things started, really leveling down because nobody knew where the market was going. But like I said, with the blank sailings, in Q3, we're seeing less and less blank sailings, which is a very, very good thing for the economy. Honestly, we are busier than we've ever been, to be quite honest. So that's a very good sign. Hopefully things to come. Hopefully it's not too big of a downturn or too long of a downturn.
Yeah, and just want to, if you could continue that thought. So pull out your crystal ball. It sounds like blank sailings are down. You're seeing demand picking up, Jason. Do you feel like things are coming back where, within, June, July, August, September, we're going to get back up to maybe where things were the previous year? Is it going to take more like 6 to 9 months to kind of get back to where we were? What do you think in terms of time horizons for companies that are struggling with this right now? When can they expect things to get back to normal? Recognize a million variables out there. So get your crystal ball and give us your best guess.
I have to tell you, the thing that I'm keeping my eye on is what's going to happen for the school year. Are we going to see a back to school season? Because that is one of the peak seasons when you have a ton of freight movement. And if we don't have kids going back to school at a very specific time and it's kind of drawn out, then maybe we don't see the demand for those products for back to school season. So I keep my eye on that. I like I said, you're seeing less blank sailings, which is in July and August, which is a very good indicator that our economy is slowly recovering. I think you're going to see, companies that are mainly e-commerce are going to continue to do well. I think you are seeing more brick and mortar stores coming back online and ordering, so that's a good thing. But I think the e-commerce companies really have a leg up and are accelerating their growth because of this. And I don't see that changing, honestly.
Yeah, that's great. Jack, any other perspective to add on that question about how quickly we can expect things to get back to kind of pre-COVID levels?
Yeah, I actually think it's going to take a little while. I think that it's going to take us a little while to come up that curve. I think businesses have to sort of rebuild their business, and I think they're getting their employees back, and production is starting back up again. But at the end of the day, it comes down to consumer demand, and how quickly will consumers uptake. And as long as unemployment remains fairly high and continues fairly high, consumer demand is going to be, I think, depressed a little bit. But I think Jason's right. I think the e-commerce companies are in the best position to sort of take advantage and come back. They've maintained a fairly solid level, and they will come back more rapidly than some others. Production will start to ramp up a little slower over time.
Yeah, no, that's good perspective. Thank you. And Jason, curious, let's say I'm a company and I wasn't diversified with my sourcing. I only had one gateway. I'd taken everything through LA or maybe Oakland or what have you. And then all of a sudden my world is rocked with COVID and I'm under a lot of pressure. What advice would you give to a company that is just right now working to make these adjustments, to heed Jim's advice on Jim's top 3? What immediate steps could they or should they be taking to start working towards having that, building that resiliency into their sourcing and their supply chains?
If they can't diversify right away, look at your options for carriers. I mean, one of the problems we've had over the last few years is the carriers have consolidated. So really there's only 3 main alliances now. And so you've got 10 or 11 real carriers. So you don't have a lot of options, which is very difficult. So as soon as one alliance blanks a sailing, then it's like a domino effect. Everybody moves over to the other 2 alliances, and they've gotten really good at figuring out the supply and demand curve. Ocean freight rates haven't declined that much. In fact, right now they're at all-time high for their spot market rates. Air freight is another option people could use. Right now it's leveling off a bit. It was very erratic for a while because we had a lot of capacity pull out because of all the passenger aircraft that left. But that has kind of stabilized, and now we're not shipping as much PPE. It seems like that's kind of leveled off. So air freight rates are kind of come back down to where it's a more normal level. So air freight might be an option if they need. It just depends on what they need. There are some specialty carriers like Matson Line. I know Zim just has a new service to the West Coast. So like I said, there are some options, but they can be very expensive.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks, Jason. Jim, anything to add? Any more detailed advice for companies on how they can be catching up right now in terms of reacting to what's going on out there?
I think Jack and Jason pretty much hit it on the head. Also, they have much more knowledge than me on how to take advantage of these carriers and what's going on right now. I just suggest that companies look to the future and take a global perspective on things. COVID-19 is just hitting its stride in some places and kind of winding down in others. If you're looking to build a sales base back again, or if you're looking to diversify your supply chain, you might take that into consideration.
Yeah, so that's good. Thank you, Jim. And let's shift gears a little bit. So we've talked about the global impact of COVID, what we're seeing, real big picture. We've talked about kind of crisis response for individual companies. If we think more kind of medium and longer term, Jim, you mentioned the free trade zone. That may be familiar to some of the companies, but not everybody. Can you go into a little bit more depth, specifically what it is? You talked about what it is and the general benefits. You know, if a company wanted to start, what type of companies would benefit from that? What advice would you have for companies on how they can start thinking through and getting some advice and consulting about how they could leverage that as a way to help them create more efficiency in their supply chains?
Great question, Miles. So the first, let me give you a little bit of a standard. If you're importing something like $1 million worth of goods a year, you could start looking at a foreign trade zone. Might be beneficial for you. It might make financial sense in the long term. If you're importing less than that, yeah, I would look for other solutions like duty drawbacks, for example, might be a place where you could get some of those tariffs and taxes back into your pocket after you've paid them. So to understand what a foreign trade zone is, as I said earlier, it's like a geographic area that's designated inside that's designated as the outside the jurisdictions of Customs and Border Patrol. So all that really means is when you import, anywhere in the world, you can defer paying taxes and tariffs on those imports. Not all of them. You're still gonna have to pay port fees and stuff like that. But you can defer those and move those goods into that specific geographic spot. Now, for companies who are thinking, well, I'm not going to move to Salt Lake anytime soon, I've got good news for you, which is that the foreign trade zone here operates on an alternative site framework. And that's a nice bureaucratic phrase for saying you can have a little piece of the foreign trade zone in your warehouse, or you can have a piece of the foreign trade zone at your facilities. In other words, you can designate a portion of where you're already storing goods as a place that's outside of the Customs and Border jurisdiction. So there's a lot of different benefits that can come as part of participating in that foreign trade zone. The first that I mentioned earlier is deferral of tariffs and taxes. In other words, you could wait until you're actually fulfilling an order of whatever you've just imported to have to pay that tariff. And so you can make smaller tariff payments instead of, if you're importing a lot all at once, that can be smaller payments that are strung out over time, but also it does give you an opportunity to game the system in that if I bring in components for a good and then I use those components to manufacture another good in the foreign trade zone, it could be that other manufactured good has a lower tariff rate than the component that you imported. And if that's the case, then it makes sense to manufacture in the foreign trade zone area so that you can pay a lower tariff over time. And probably the best way to get in touch with someone to go really in depth on your foreign trade zone is through Salt Lake City's Economic Development Department. The Salt Lake City manages the foreign trade zone, and while Ginger at UIPA or me or Liesel at Economic Development can talk you through it, they're probably the best positioned to do it. The Salt Lake City also works with a number of different foreign trade zones specific consultants who can take a really deep look at your ACE reporting and help you determine what the cost benefit analysis is going to be. Because it's not like participating in a foreign trade zone has no cost at all, but that cost could be relatively small against the benefits you can incur and the control that you retain by utilizing a foreign trade zone.
That's great.
Does that answer your question? Is there anything more I can give there?
Yep. No, that was fantastic. Thank you. And one other benefit is, and correct me if I'm wrong, you could import those components. You're not paying tariffs on those components, and you use it to manufacture something. If you are re-exporting your final product, then you can go ahead and export it, and you never have to pay tariffs on what those components that came into it. Is that correct, Jim?
Yes, thank you. That's correct.
Yep, and so it really, really powerful. Obviously, something that doesn't apply to everybody, but for the companies that it does apply to, they can take advantage of it. It's a very, very powerful tool that, to be honest, is really underutilized here in the state. Also, I believe there is some geographic limitations. Isn't it about a 60-mile radius around Salt Lake City? Is that correct, Jim?
Yep, 60-mile radius from essentially the Salt Lake City airport. So if you're living in Logan and you've jumped on this call, I'm sorry, you're just outside. But Brigham City, you might be in. Likewise, if you're down in Provo, you're definitely in. I think once you get down to Nephi Joab area, you're cutting it pretty close.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you for that, Jim. Jack or Jason, anything else to add on the free trade zone?
Well, I would just say I think free trade zones are a tremendous tool, and I think that people really need to look into them a little bit. If you have goods coming in from overseas or you export overseas, you really ought to look at foreign trade zones, see what the benefits are, really dig into it, see if it can help your business in some way. I think they're a tremendous tool, and I think people get daunted by them because they're a federal program, and they worry about them a little bit. But Jim's exactly right; they're a great program, and really something that people ought to dig in on.
Yeah, no, that's great.
We set up a couple of foreign trade zones, and they're very beneficial.
Go ahead.
With cash flow.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Just saying that we set up a couple of free trade zones for customers, and like Jim was saying, they are very beneficial for cash flow and reducing your tariffs. So if you're qualified, definitely look into one.
That's great. Thank you, Jason. Reminder to everybody, now's your chance to ask questions to any of the experts. Go ahead and put in questions in the chat box. I'll take the look at those and we'll ask the questions. While the listeners are thinking through the questions, another thing, Jim, that you mentioned that I just want to draw out and make sure that we have a chance to help people realize the significance are the duty drawback services. Can you break that down a little bit more detail, Jim? Explain what they are, how companies can take advantage of them. And again, it's one of those tools that may not apply to everybody, but for those that it does, it can be really important and get some cash back into companies.
Thanks, Miles. I'm getting really good at describing federal programs between this and PPP loans. For those of you who don't know, World Trade Center Utah spent a lot of effort helping companies figure out PPP loans over the last few months, and I'm wallowing in federal programs right now. So happy to continue parsing the red tape sea, if you will, and help you understand some of these programs. So duty drawback is another program you can use to help improve your cash flow and help reduce the rates that you're paying on imported goods. So the short version of this is, if you import a good, or if your supplier imports a good, and then that good is either re-exported or it's manufactured or processed into some other component or good and then exported, there's an opportunity for you to get the fees, the duties and fees that you paid when you imported the material good back. And it's a pretty good and complicated process. We have a number of different people in the state of Utah who can help you to do that. But long story short, it's a great program for people who aren't importing so much that a foreign trade zone might make sense for them. A lot of the people who can help you with duty drawbacks do it on commission. So they get paid from they get paid a portion of what you receive back from the drawback. So it's actually it's kind of a no-brainer. I think if you're importing goods and then re-exporting those goods, or if you're exporting goods and your suppliers are importing materials or components that go into your goods, there's no reason not to take a look at a drawback program.
Great. Thank you for that, Jim. Let's shift gears a little bit and think about the future and perhaps a little bit bigger picture in the economy. Oh, wait, stop. Louis, we just got a question in. So I'll say that big picture question here in a second. We got a question. Do duty drawbacks apply to Section 232 steel and AI tariffs?
I know that there's a process for getting drawbacks under the 301 tariffs, but I'm actually going to punt this question and see if Jason knows the answer, because I honestly don't.
You know, I honestly don't either. I'd have to consult with, we've done duty drawbacks for a couple of companies, and I'm never steel, but I could ask my custom South broker. I have a couple on staff that I could find out from them.
Yeah, if you, whoever asked that question, if you leave your contact information in the chat or just send it to jporter@wtcutah.com, I will get you the answer on that.
Great. Thank you, Jason and Jim. So back to my other question. So, you know, we've talked a lot about here in the state about advanced manufacturing. And Jack, when we think about the inland port, you know, my view has always been this isn't just about moving goods from point A to point B, but it's about developing a system and a network, and through the Port Authority, the ability to turbocharge the development of advanced manufacturing here in the state. You know, advanced manufacturing, right? So this is manufacturing that requires relatively less labor, but it's high-skilled labor and not lots of low-cost labor. That makes the places with an abundance of high-skilled labor more competitive, and it's more based off of, you know, machines, and it's a very data-driven manufacturing process. Some people talk about the fourth industrial revolution as we bring about this as we move forward with advanced manufacturing. I think it's interesting to note that places that are competitive for advanced manufacturing require a highly educated workforce, like I talked about, proximity to markets, because the idea is that you manufacture, like we've been talking about, shorter supply chains, you're manufacturing things closer to markets. It enables customization in the manufacturing process in ways that weren't possible if you're manufacturing on the other side. It also requires a strong tech ecosystem because of advanced manufacturing, and also a high quality of life because the workforce is more mobile now than it ever has been. And so when you think about each of those inputs, Utah will excel in all of them. And so, Jack, I'd be curious to get your thoughts on, as we think about the future of Utah's economy, as we think about our putting together an economic response plan, not just for the current crisis, but thinking through how we use this crisis to position Utah to really excel in the years and the decades to come. I'd be curious for your thoughts. What role or how can the inland port be a tool in accelerating the rise and the success of advanced manufacturing here in the state?
Yeah, it's absolutely, I mean, it's fundamental. Again, it's the backbone. A good, strong logistics system is really the backbone of a strong economy. And as companies in the shorter term look to nearshore or reshore their supply chains, that logistics network and that logistics infrastructure supporting that will be critically important. But in the longer term, as we start to really promote, and that gives us I think the differentiator as we start to promote and project Utah as a center for manufacturing, for advanced manufacturing of new technologies and new components and new applications of manufacturing, because of those very logistics facilities, that very logistics network, that goods movement is important and is applicable whether you're importing components from China or you're building goods here and exporting them to markets in the US or for export. That very same network of road, rail, air, the inland port location here in Salt Lake City, the satellite ports that we'll be developing across the state, that network weaves together and provides that backbone really for growing that advanced manufacturing. And I really think one of the opportunities for us in advanced manufacturing is really focused on the logistics industry. The new technologies in zero emissions, in data connectivity, in automation and autonomy that are coming and being applied at the inland port, that we're going to be really trying to drive into the inland port for deployment here at the inland port. This also becomes a great place for testing, for R&D, and for eventually for manufacturing of those new things. So automation and autonomy, robotics, zero emissions, battery electric, solar power, battery storage, LNG fueled things, coming hydrogen fuel cells and hydrogen fuel alternatives. All those things are going to require a whole new realm of manufacturing and distribution, and we can be at the hub of that.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely correct, Jack. And, if you think about it, we have the opportunity to do R&D, to develop these new technologies, and then the inland port, and really the entire state because of where we're located, with the freeways, the rail, the airport, that becomes the sandbox to refine and improve and test and prove these technologies to help make Utah be a global leader, not only in the flow of goods, the crossroads of the West and crossroads of the world, but really on the innovation side as well. We're involved across the state. Many of us are thinking through the point of the mountain, a huge, massive real estate opportunity right in the heart of Silicon Slopes. And it strikes me as an opportunity, as a component of that, to have a few key centers of excellence where you can imagine down the point of the mountain where we are doing some R&D. We're getting great innovation happening right there in a few key areas. And Jack, everything you mentioned would fit in perfectly. And then whether it's drone technology or automation or robotics, whatever is being developed there, then all of a sudden you have these partners. And the inland port would be one. You could go out into the West Desert for drones and to test and refine them. But we figure out how to combine both the R&D and the innovation with the assets that we already have in place to test and refine and scale them. And if you can get that working symbiotically, all of a sudden you get this really powerful dynamic that is going to help Utah propel us to excel in areas that right now we have some key inputs and opportunities, but we're not yet fully taking advantage of.
I think you're exactly right, Miles. And one of the things that I think is a benefit that we have of being here, being where we are located, is in the long term, it's because we're right in the middle of the North American market, and we're equidistant from the markets of the West Coast, which are big consumer markets, but also big markets for export, and the markets of the Midwest, which are the big distribution markets and consumer markets. But in that manufacturing space, and in looking at those deployments in manufacturing, if you're looking for a place to R&D and test this equipment, what better? I mean, it's one thing to test it on the coast in Southern California, where you're at sea level and 75 degrees all the time. It's another thing to test those components and those goods at 4,000 feet of elevation, where it's 110 degrees in the summer and it's 10 below in the winter. That's a real test, and companies find value in that, real value in that. The other thing too, I think is a real positive for us is because of that. They'll have the opportunity to really test those things in real world environment and really take advantage of that. I think that's a huge opportunity for us and a huge differentiator between us and other folks that we're competing with.
Yep, no, that's very, very true. Well, thank you, Jack and Jason and Jim, for spending time with us today. Thank you to everybody who's tuned in. Again, Jim has put his contact information in the chat box. Please reach out. And whether it's free trade zone or duty drawbacks, Jason mentioned that what they do, they're helping companies participate in the free trade zone. They're helping companies figure out duty drawbacks, as well as the shipping and logistics, customs clearing, everything else. You've got great expertise with Jason and Hansen International. And then, of course, Jack, we're so grateful to have you here in the state of Utah, helping us think through how to set up the inland port and take advantage of these opportunities that we see coming down the pipeline. So again, thank you for being with us. To our panelists, thank you to our participants, and we look forward to having you back on a future webinar. Have a great day, everybody.